Welcome back, listeners, to another episode of the New Standard. And as always, I have my partner in crime to my left, Neal Coulong. How are you doing, Neil?
I'm doing great, Lance. I hope you are as well. It's a beautiful day. We're excited to talk some Steelers football here this early Thursday morning in Pittsburgh for me.
Yeah, in a very early Thursday morning for me on the West Coast. I already flubbed within the first 10 seconds of the show. But I don't think that's going to be the nature of this show. We're going to have a fantastic show. But before we jump into the show, I want to wish a happy Veterans Day to all of the service people, servicemen and women who have served this country. We thank you for your service and we thank you for the sacrifice that you have made to this country. I want to particularly send a happy Veterans Day to all of my family members, my grandfather, and multiple uncles and cousins and so on who have served. So I want again wish a happy Veterans Day to everyone out there and to Steelers Nation. And before we hop into the show, I also want to give a shout out to show sponsor High Bar Apparel. Make sure you go to highbarapparel.com. Also, if you want to join the show, we have numerous ways you can do it. Hop on the podcast. There's a variety of podcast links, podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. Also, you can go to YouTube and join us within the program by doing a search for Lance Williams and the New Standard or doing a search for Neal Coulong and the New Standard. So let's hop right into it, Neil. Jump into some of the news and notes and injuries for this upcoming game against the Detroit Lions.
It sounds as if leading into the week they've managed to steer pretty clear of most things. We aren't sure yet on Chase Claypool's availability. That's going to be definitely something to monitor. But I would say once again, Lance, the question is whether Zach Banner will or will not be able to participate. For the sake of the Steelers moving forward, I think it would be ideal if Banner could get out there simply because what we're seeing on a week-to-week basis is a team that I think fairly can be described as one that does not have their best offensive line out on the field. As it is, Claypool did not practice. That's not a good thing for Wednesday. Ben Roethlisberger got probably more of a veteran day off, but they are still listing the pec and the right shoulder injury as the reasons why he did not practice. Robert Spillane was listed as an ankle injury, but he was a full participant, as was Isaiah Buggs. You might remember he left the game early with a hip injury in the win over Chicago, and Cam Hayward went down for a little bit and took the breath away from Steeler Nation, but he was a full practice participant Wednesday. Limited was Eric Ebron with the hamstring injury that's caused him to miss the last two games. I don't think a whole lot of people really miss him in the lineup, and his participation in the game moving forward will probably best be described as limited as well. So that's what they have. That's fairly good news. The fact that Banner is not on there, I think, suggests, if nothing else, he's going to be, able to play from an injury perspective. Will he or won't he will be the question. And I guess we're probably not going to find out about that until game day. That's a 1 p.m. kickoff Sunday against the 0-8 Detroit Lions. And that's pretty much it, Lance, because I don't have their injury report in front of me. And to be honest, I don't think we know a whole lot of the players who are on that team anyway. So if that matters, I can find that for you and I can read it to you.
Yeah, the Lions are sort of like that mystery stew that you get when you wake up at home and your mom or your dad threw together some mystery stew and it was all the leftovers in your refrigerator just thrown in a pot and then somehow they combined and they tasted pretty good, but you don't know any of the ingredients, but it just tastes good because your mom and dad made it and it's just fantastic. No one knows Lions players. I know one particular Lions player, Cal football baby, Jared Goff. I know,
Yeah.
Jared Goff is the floor. A Rod, or excuse me, Q Rod is the ceiling. Q Rod is the ceiling. State Farm discount double check. The interesting thing about that, but not to belabor that real quick, because I want to ask you a question about the Claypool injury, and I'm giving my thoughts on that. Here's the irony about the whole issue with Aaron Rodgers is that I'm sure that the NFL has fined somebody for a uniform violation more money. That's one. And number two, if you have State Farm as your insurance and you lie on a claim, you're going to owe them money. You're going to be in significant trouble. And you may owe them more than Aaron Rodgers owes for his fine, which is the equivalent when you look at the total of his contract of about $35. But I don't want to get into that. That's his issue. That's the league's issue to manage. But looking at this Claypool injury, I'm thinking, and I'm just going to make it real simple for the listeners. I'm going to say that the Z would be Deontay. He'd be the flanker. The split end, the X would be Washington. Who would be the slot receiver, that third receiver, if Claypool indeed is out? Or do you think they might go to more 12 personnel, one running back, two tight end? How do you think it will affect the targets, and how will they deploy them in the game if Claypool does not play on Sunday against the Lions?
You just want to jump in and make us invoke this name right away, huh?
Yes.
A couple things of that. Let me start off by saying their personnel decisions are not going to be entirely based on their injuries. If they want to run more 12 than 11, it's going to be because of the Detroit Lions, not because of where the Steelers are in terms of injury, barring a catastrophe. Now, in game, that might be different. But for the sake of what we know right now, clearly, Ray McDonald is the slot. He's been the slot since Juju went down a couple weeks ago. Now, how often they're going to utilize Ray McLeod in anything other than a handoff situation remains to be seen. He doesn't get a whole lot of targets. He doesn't really deserve a whole lot of targets. So I think offensively, they haven't found what they want to do yet in the absence of Juju with kind of what they're trying to do with a fairly vanilla offense. Vanilla is probably not the right word. They don't have a whole lot of pop. They're not an explosive offensive team for a variety of reasons. I don't know if any of those reasons are ones that they can fix. But Ray McLeod is not going to be the answer to that, I can assure you. So I wouldn't imagine it'd be an emphasis to get him the ball in this game versus any other game. Maybe it is. I don't know. It's depends on what they see. They're looking at film far more intently than I am. They're paid a lot more money to make those decisions than I am. You have to, as players, any one of them will tell you they have to go out there and trust that the plan that's drawn up is the one that's going to work. And as you've mentioned astutely on this program many times, most things don't work. There's a lot of failure in the game of football. You're looking to win 12 or 13 plays, really. The other ones are probably just going to be a draw. You're going to split with your opponent. They're pretty equal in the NFL, as we saw, I think, Monday. Teams are not all that dissimilar from each other, regardless of what their record is, regardless of what the buzz about them in social media is. Most of the time, teams are fairly competitive with each other. So as far as Ray goes, as far as the slot or 11 personnel goes, what I would say is this. If you want to run 12 personnel, you need to be able to run the ball. 12 personnel should be more of a running package, which is to say you need to be able to run out of it. Whether you do or not is a different story. If they don't respect you running the ball, it's not that hard to cover tight ends in the slot. They don't move very far. They're not typically all that fast. We are not seeing it as great as Pat Freiermuth has been in tight spaces. We're not seeing a field stretching player. He's not that dynamic of a guy. You can get him the ball in short spaces, and he's done a great job with that. He's handled everything they've given him, and he's absolutely going to be the primary tight end the rest of the way, and he should be. We're seeing his targets increase week to week. That's a good thing. The question is, how dynamic of an offense can they be with what they have? And to me, that suggests you probably need to run more 11 than you would 12. And some of that is Ray McLeod is just a faster, probably more versatile player than, let's say, that it's Kevin Rader, who was pulled off of the practice squad to play last week. What if it's Zach Gentry? Whatever combination of those two that you would have next to Freiermuth, assuming Ebron can't play, you're not looking at the same level of dynamic ability in your passing game as if McLeod was on the field. That says a whole lot. I don't think either one of them are especially great options, but you're not playing a great defensive team either. The Lions, they're not very deep defensively. They're not very good defensively. So it's not as if the Steelers need to really, trick them into a lot of things. I think they're capable of lining up and probably winning more snaps than they'd lose. And I think knowing the Steelers and knowing their approach in games like this in the past, they're not going to play for a blowout. They're not going to try to beat teams by 28 points because there isn't a point in that. The one thing this offense cannot do is turn the ball over.
Well,
So to me,
let's wait on that before you get into your breakdown, because I feel like you're getting into your breakdown, and I want you to wait a little bit before we do that.
rounding it back to 11 personnel, I just think that there is more ability for them to make a play or two in the short space out of that than they would out of 12. So Ray, I don't think is an essential component to the game, but to run that, you have to get him the ball. And to this point, I think he's run more handoff stuff than he has, legitimate pass routes where they're looking to get him the ball. He doesn't have a lot of targets this year.
Yeah, he's been the jet sweep guy. But before we jump into our post game wrap up number for the Bears, and I'm going to shift it from the Bears game. I'm going to shift it around a little bit. I'm going to give my number first because I think your number that you sent me leads into some stats that I want to jump into about both teams. But before we do that, big up the Steelers Freak. Steelers Freak said he served 28 years in the Army. So thank you for your service, Steelers Freak. And I also wanted to mention a comment from Double H. Double H said, Happy Veterans Day. Being the son of a former Army Reserve Major and Surgeon, I know firsthand the pride, risks, and sacrifice that many have made currently in making the defense of this country. So I want to thank you, Double H, and your family as well for the sacrifice that you guys have made in serving this country. And again, big up to all the veterans out there, and thank you for your service. Let me jump into my number. And we like to do this if you're new to the program. We like to do a post-game wrap-up number. I call it Neal's number and Lance's number because when we do the post-game, we try to do it really quick when it's really fresh. It's sort of a freestyle show, and which is good. I think it captures kind of the energy that you're taking and leaving from the game. But I'm going to give you two numbers. Here are my two numbers from Monday night's game, 35.3 and 4.2. The 35.3 represents the third down conversion percentage made in the game against the Bears. The Steelers were 6 of 17. If you're a team that's not explosive, which is the 4.2, the yards per play, to score and sustain offense, you have to convert third downs. I think what we've seen is this team, in terms of touches and focus and what they want to do, has become more of a Najee Harris centered offense. In the game on Monday, Najee Harris got 22 carries. I don't know how many receptions or how many targets he got in the game. I can look it up real quick. But when you look at the Steelers, they're a Najee Harris game, and he got 3 targets. So Najee got 25 touches. I think they ran about 69 plays. They ran 66 plays, and he got 25 touches of those. So that's probably about 40%, I'm saying, just roughly. If you're going to be a team that averages 4.2 yards per play, you're going to be run heavy, and your offense is going to center around running the ball and getting the ball to your running back, you're going to have to convert third downs because you're not explosive. You're not getting plays in chunks. Now, it's an approach, but you have to keep the ball. You have to convert third downs because it's going to take you longer to move the ball downfield, which is going to make it more difficult for you to score. So if they're going to continue this approach, they have to convert third downs. And that's why my two numbers are 35.3 and 4.2. What I would like to see moving forward is they get more big plays in the passing game. And we saw in the game on Monday, for them to get into field goal range to win that game, they had to hit a big play. I think this formula is one that can work, but it is one that will only work if they're averaging, I think, 45% or more on third down. You keep the ball, you run more snaps, more plays, and you put yourself in a better position to score. They have to start converting more third downs and averaging more yards per play because 35.3% and 4.2 won't work moving forward if they want to go to the playoffs. What's your number, Neal?
My number, moving ahead a little bit, looking at the Lions game, and this is just because I've been studying the Lions, kind of getting a sense of who they are as a team. Two numbers I'm going to put together: 2 and 6. 2 games, and this is a weird stat. 2 games this year, the Detroit Lions have lost on 50-plus yard field goals at the end of regulation. If either of those kicks missed, they're up. They have a win in either one of those games. That was against Baltimore and Minnesota. That tends to be kind of a, you're capable of playing a competitive game type of stat. It took a lot for your opponent to beat you that particular day. On the other hand, though, 6 is every other game they've played, which is an 8-point or more loss, including a disastrous 44-6 loss to Philadelphia before their bye week. That was the last game they played. If it were me and I was head coach Dan Campbell of the Lions, I would not have made the post bye week practices very easy for them. I think they're going to come out with quite a bit of aggression in this game. This is really the point in time, and I've said this a couple times. You get on a losing streak in the NFL, it's no longer about your pride. It's no longer about what your fans think of you. Now it's about keeping your job. Now it's about putting on good film for when you're cut and have to go explain to somebody else why an 0-17 team didn't think that you were good enough to come back the next year. They need to put good film down in order to stay in the NFL. That's a personal thing. You don't want to take your kids out of school. You don't want to move from your house. You don't want to have to be a vagabond or throughout the entire season. That is something that teams tend to be, thinking about when they're on these losing streaks. You get good games from bad teams. I understand that they haven't won a game. I don't think there really is a team that is dramatically worse than one another in the NFL. And it certainly is not the Pittsburgh Steelers and anybody. The Steelers have won their last 2 games on maybe not last second field goals, but late drives that they had to have to win. They've given up those late drives and been able to pull off victories. They've needed dramatic plays to win. It's a 5-3 team. There's no doubt that it's a 5-3 team. But that very easily could be 3-5. Very easily could be 2-6. They're not far from that. So to act as if the Detroit Lions are a vastly inferior team, it is ridiculous. Don't think for a second the Steelers are capable of overlooking anybody in the NFL, even the worst team in the league. The Steelers are not the best team in the league. They are far from the best team in the league. They are not that far from the Lions. I'd say they're a lot closer to Detroit than to whoever the best team is in the NFL in this weird season. Arizona, call them that. The Steelers are not at that level, and they can't look past this. And I would think this is the type of game Dan Campbell, in his first year as head coach, needs to make a statement with his players that we're all in on this in my way. We're going to do this my way. Do it or you're gone. And that includes the coaching staff as well. So you're going to get a good effort from the Lions in this game. And I don't think they're that far away from notching their first victory this season. I would think they feel pretty confident coming into Heinz Field to play a Steelers team that hasn't really beaten anybody convincingly yet this year.
You make some solid points. And let me give you some numbers to back up your point that there's not much difference between these two teams. If you look at yards, the Lions are averaging 321 yards per game, which is 26th. The Steelers are averaging 324. The Lions are averaging 5 yards per play, which is 28th. The Steelers are averaging 5.1. In terms of yards per attempt in passing, the Lions are averaging 6.5, which is 29th. The Steelers 6.6, which is 27. In terms of running the football, they're both running at about 23 to 24 times per game. In terms of yards per game, rushing, Lions are averaging 93.1, which is 26th. The Steelers are 88.4, which is 28th. Yards per carry, the Lions are 4.1, which is 20th in the National Football League. The Steelers are 3.6, which is 29th. The only significant difference on offense is the points per game, and both aren't good. The Lions are averaging 17 points per game, which is 29th, and the Steelers are averaging 20, which is 23rd. And some of that is the special teams score against the Bills, which would take the number down a little bit. It's probably closer to 18 and a half true offensive points. With that being said, your point, Neal, is spot on. Offensively, these teams are pretty much mirror images of each other. There's not much difference. And that's the interesting thing about the National Football League, and you say it all the time, is that there's not much difference between these teams. These are all professional teams staffed by professional, solid coaches. And a lot of times games twist and turn based on small plays, like the Ray McLeod idiotic fumble play where he takes it out of the end zone. So when you look at this
Yep.
Detroit game, they're winless, but they're not like getting blasted and destroyed every single game in every week. So I think this is going to be a very tough game. So give me your keys and break this game down a little bit for us, Neal.
The thing is with Pittsburgh, we've seen, and somebody mentioned this in the comments earlier, historically, um, I don't know if this relates necessarily, but a good Steelers team is a team that knows how to run the ball, is capable of running the ball situationally, probably more than anything else. They pushed that, I think, on Monday. They really wanted to be a running team. They went against a good defensive line, a good run stopping unit in Chicago, and they lost. So, I mean, they won the game. I mean, they lost in terms of rushing. They did not run the ball well. Chicago won that battle if we were to break it down. I would think the Steelers would want to try that again, and they're going to need to challenge their offensive line to come out firing the way that they had in previous weeks. They had run the ball pretty well in a couple games leading into that. They are going to want to stay on the field as long as possible in this game. It is very difficult in this NFL in particular, the same way that it was 25 years ago, to score 7 points on 10 plus yard drives, 10 plus play drives. There are only so many of those you're going to be able to do against NFL defenses. You're going to screw up at some point. They might not make as big a mistake as you. You might turn the ball over. You can give up sacks. It's hard to have long, sustained drives, but the Steelers don't have great playmakers. With or without Claypool, they are not a big play offense, and they're not going to be anytime soon. They need to win the war of attrition up front. It's going to come down to their offensive line versus Detroit's defensive line, and that's a battle that they can win. I don't think the offensive line, they're clearly not the best unit in the league, but they are capable of beating a team like Detroit. Detroit is not athletic up front. They don't have a great pass rush anyway. I think the Steelers would want to run at them, control the clock, try to get a takeaway on defense, and make this a very one-dimensional game. Probably the result of that is going to be a low-scoring affair, which is something we've seen over the last couple of weeks. I think they got away with a little bit against Chicago. 2 games in a row, they've gotten off to a hot start, taken a decent lead in the locker room, and all but lost it in the second half. They're going to play a balanced game throughout because that's just kind of how they are. They haven't shown many times anyway that they are capable of playing well on both sides of the ball for 4 quarters. In fact, that hasn't happened. I don't think either unit has shown, maybe twice with the defense, that they're capable of drive in and drive out, getting the better of their opponent. So to me, possession is going to be key to this. They're going to need to get Najee Harris and the run game going. And along with that, Matt Canada has done a great job, I think anyway, of mixing things up, adding some variety to boost those rushing yards without your primary running back. He plays the wide game on the field very well. He's utilized receivers, even tight ends in handoff situations. We've seen a lot of tight end screens, which are really running plays to bigger guys you wouldn't expect to get the ball. Things like that, they help keep a defense off balance a little bit. I think Canada's done a great job of utilizing what is generally not all that talented of an offense. They really aren't. And they have a bad offensive line. They're doing the best job that they can to maintain possession. I think that has to be the focus for them this week. Your offensive line, I don't want to say has to win the game for you, but they need to make it competitive. The last week, they almost lost because of it. It's obvious that their defense can't be counted on for an entire half to really shut a team down at least twice in one game. That's what happened the last 2 weeks. Defense did a great job in the first half and largely fell apart in the second half. I would imagine Detroit's noticed that, and I would imagine their plan is going to be to attack them aggressively on the defensive side of the ball. So Pittsburgh is going to need to counter that by keeping them off the field as much as they can, get Harris going, get the offensive line going, and hold on to the ball. Key thing to all of this that we have, I didn't think that we'd say at any point this season, 4-game winning streak, Ben Roethlisberger has not turned the ball over in 4 straight games. I don't think that's a coincidence. They have no room for error when it comes to that. They cannot turn the ball over. And knock on wood, they've gotten good things in that regard out of Najee Harris. But your quarterback fumbling the ball is usually a byproduct of your protection. And Ben Roethlisberger doesn't get good protection. He needs to be smart when he's throwing the ball. He needs to live to punt. It's okay if it's 3rd and 12 and they're not running 5 guys past the sticks and in zero protection, basically. they're going to have to minimize risks, take what they can, and try to force the mistakes to be made when their defense is on the field.
I was talking to my friend John Davis, big up JD, from Detroit, and he's a pseudo Lions fan. He's sort of the autumn wind is a Raider fan and sort of a Lions fan. He's a long, true and true Detroit native. What up, Doe? And he said basically the only explosive player or only decent offensive weapon that they have is TJ Hawkinson. And when you look at Detroit, I mean, it's a tough watch. I mean, Detroit's a tough watch. I think one thing that stands out from a numbers perspective is they're giving up close to 3 sacks per game. They're getting sacked on about 6.9% of their dropbacks, which is 22nd in the league, and they've allowed 23 sacks. If you look at this team defensively, the one thing I think they do fairly well, not as good as they have in past years because you don't have Tuitt and you don't have Alualu and you don't have Bud Dupree, is they do get sacks. The Steelers do get after the quarterback pretty well. Um, I think what they have to do, if they can get some pressure, if they can limit their running game and get some pressure, I think they put themselves into good positions. The Lions don't particularly run the football very well, but I think what you're saying is when you have two teams like this that struggle like this offensively and both aren't explosive, it's a turnover game. If it's a turnover game and a possession game, if they can possess the ball, not turn the ball over, I think they'll be in good position. Let me ask you one question here. I've heard a lot of stuff or read a lot of stuff on Twitter, seen some stuff on the Four Letter Network and some other stuff about the dreaded word trap game. And I'm going to put this in the live chat as well. Is this a trap game, Neal? And define what a trap game is before you give me your thoughts on if this is a trap game.
A trap game to others is a game in which you tend to be a heavy favorite, and it's something that the perception is because this team isn't all that good, you're overlooking them to the rest of the season. You're on a 4-game winning streak. This is your 7.5-point favorites per Tipico, which is what I saw right before we came on the show. This is a game the Steelers should win, and you've all but accepted that they're going to win. And then they don't. That the trap game mentality comes from the past, which is other situations in which you as a fan was overconfident, not the team. The team isn't going to approach this as if, wow, we don't care about the Detroit Lions. They're getting paid a lot of money to do the things that they're doing. And if they don't do it, they're out of a job. They are reminded of that, I'm not joking, on pretty much a minute-to-minute basis when they're there. They are highly motivated by the coaching staff that's in the same position that they're in. If they don't win, they don't get paid, and they're out of a job. They have to focus on what they have in front of them for sure. And I think by and large, the teams that are best able to do that are the ones that have the most success. But in their minds, there are no trap games. They're getting hit either way. It hurts either way. The record of the opponent had absolutely nothing to do with the guy who tore his ACL, the guy who didn't prepare, who wasn't in shape and didn't play well. The record of the team they played against didn't matter when he got cut the next day. They don't have the mindset that fans do. They don't have the mindset that gamblers do. The Pittsburgh Steelers, in their mindset, they may as well be playing the Super Bowl champion right now. It doesn't make a difference to them. They have to go out and execute what they're told to do. Now, Mike Tomlin is ultimately the one that oversees all of that. He bears that responsibility. What, again, I said this earlier in the segment, the problem that I have with this being considered a trap game is that people think the Steelers are that much better than the Lions. And I'm telling you, they're not. They're not that good of a team. They've done a phenomenal job winning close games, winning games that you could see going either way against some teams that, statistically might have not been as strong as the top teams in the game. They've played close. They're not playing down to their competition. They're at the level of that competition. They're not that much better than the Seattle Seahawks. I thought the Bears played really well, especially in the second half. Justin Fields looked like a damn all-pro. That kid's a stud. He's really good. He had a great half. Arthur Millette helped that. I think there was, perhaps some breakdowns there that they need to fix. That certainly helps. But it just goes to show the Steelers are not that much. They're not a dominant team in the NFL. They're not just going to show up and beat anybody. I don't care who they are. So the idea that this is a trap game is nonsense to me because they're not better than the Lions are. It's not as if they have way more than the Lions do. The Lions aren't a good team. Don't get me wrong. I would pick the Steelers to win, but I'll say this: I'm taking Detroit plus 7.5 in that game easily. I don't think Pittsburgh is really 8 points better than anybody. So it to me, it's not a trap game. We will only hear about how Mike Tomlin plays down to the competition if they lose, or if they win and it's close, we'll still hear the same thing. I'm telling you now, it's probably going to be a close game because Pittsburgh is not that good of a team yet. They're building, they're improving, they're better than they were in weeks 1 and 2 for sure, but they're not at a level yet where you can expect them to just show up and roll whoever it is that they're playing.
Let's jump into a couple of the comments from the people in the live chat. And thank you, everybody in the live chat. If you're in the live chat, please hit the like button. And if you catch this program later, please hit the like button. And if you're listening to the show and you haven't subscribed, please do both subscribe and like. Ollie Howard Species 5618 said, no such thing as a trap game in the pros, in my opinion. I agree somewhat, but in listening to what Neal said, this is where I'll disagree with Ali. I think there are, I should say, trap games in the NFL, but I think the key point to that is there has to be a discernible difference between the teams. So take, for instance, if the Buccaneers were playing the Lions, I would say that was a trap game because the Buccaneers, in my opinion, are clearly better than the Lions and should be favored by multiple scores. Let's jump into a couple comments, a couple other comments. Double H brought up a great point. Last week was NFL trap week. A lot
Very
of
true.
favorites got beat.
3 7-point underdogs won straight up, and a fourth came damn close on Monday night.
Yeah, anytime that the Bills get beat by the Jags 9-6, it's definitely a trap week. And speaking of the Jags, and I hate to give gambling tips, but and I don't encourage anyone to gamble on the National Football League, but always bet, always take Jacksonville or who they're playing and give the points. I call it the Jacksonville strategy. It's a strategy that I've given my brother for the last 2 to 3 years, and he's won a ton of games. It's just a bet you make every week, the Jacksonville strategy. Big up to Melvin. And also I want to wish Melvin's mom a happy birthday. Mama Mel, big up, happy birthday. Hopefully Sonny is treating you right. If you're not in the same city, he's showing you some love and you guys are doing something. So big up to Mel's mom. And Mel wrote, no, in order to be a trap game, you have to be confident in your team. There is no way this team could look past my high school team that is number 1 in Tennessee. We are way too inconsistent to look past anyone. And that's what Neal said. I mean, this team is what it is. You saw the stats that we laid out, or you heard the stats that we laid out. These teams are very similar. I mean, they're almost carbon copy of each other in terms of their offense. They're very similar. Wes Hickok chimed in and said, I agree that Pittsburgh isn't significantly better than Detroit. Having said that, even as an aging QB, Ben is way better than Jared Goff, in my opinion. I'm not sure.
Look at their stats, Wes. This is really interesting to me. Look at their stats. They're almost carbon copies of each other. Very, very similar. I would give the edge to Ben, but I don't think there's a point in trying to describe which one is better. They are largely the same quarterback. Statistically speaking, we're not going to talk about Super Bowl rings or any of that crap. It has nothing to do with 2021 week 10. Jared Goff is not playing exceptionally worse football than Ben Roethlisberger is right now. Ben is, I think, getting comfortable. He's improving, but I don't know about you guys, but he's a game away from disaster. It's been like that every week. It's going to be like that every week. He's very limited physically. There's not a whole lot that he is able to do. Goff is hamstrung from a complete lack of weapons on their offense. They don't have anything. I did want to get back to Hawkinson, TJ Hawkinson, who, and maybe this is an off-season bit that we can do, Lance. If we were to look back over the players that I really wish the Steelers had drafted and had a reasonable chance to draft, Hawkinson would be the tight end of that team for me. Absolutely love the guy as a player. He was a great prospect. He's turning into it. I think he would have been even better in Pittsburgh with the way that they have taught and the way that they have emphasized 3-down tight ends over the years. Hawkinson would have been a clone for any great tight end who played 3 downs over the NFL the last 30 years, in my opinion. He's a great player. He's a dangerous weapon, but they don't have anything else. They're not stretching the field any better than Pittsburgh is. So as far as Goff, he's a very limited player. I don't think he's very smart. I'm sorry, Cal Bears, but Goff ran out of favor in Los Angeles largely because Sean McVay had to do everything for him, and Sean McVay got sick of doing it. So they traded him and got a quarterback now who's playing at an MVP level. I don't think that's a coincidence. Goff is not physically limited the way Ben is. He's probably more mentally limited in terms of depth and personnel. Their offense is more limited, perhaps, than Pittsburgh's is. But by and large, both of them are handling those limitations in a very similar way. I think Ben Ben would get the edge in my book, but let's not act like they're facing, they're not facing anything significantly worse than they have to overcome throughout the course of a game, which is why I think this is going to be a lower scoring, more competitive game than what a lot of fans I'm seeing are thinking that it will be.
Let's take a look at this comparison of their stats. And I'm just using ESPN stats. I'm going to use the big 4 stats that they have here. In terms of QBR, Jared Goff is 28.9. I'd have to think that that's pretty much one of the lowest in the league if you add the rookies.
The problem with QBR, sorry, Lance, I don't mean to cut you off. The problem with QBR is basically what it says is it doesn't matter unless you play in close games. Half of your production is cut off and valueless because your defense can't stop water from running uphill. I don't think that's necessarily an indictment of the quarterback. And it's a stat that makes sense at the middle, but not in the extremes. I think that's where Goff is. His QBR is not going to be very good. And I'm not saying that he is a good quarterback, but I would imagine he's the lowest in the league. I don't think he is the lowest passer in the league. It's just his team gets blown out pretty consistently. It happens often. In tight games, though, he's been pretty much the same. I think he's largely the same player, which, again, is limited. But I don't think he's a complete deterrent to his team's lack of success right now.
Let me give you the other stats here. So Ben's QBR is 42.4. His completion percentage is 65.6. Jared Goff's is 66.9. He's thrown for Ben Roethlisberger 1,986 yards. Jared Goff has thrown for 1,995 yards. Goff has also thrown for 8 touchdowns, and Ben Roethlisberger has thrown for 10 touchdowns. Looks kind of identical to me. And that's a great point that you brought out. That, like to Wes's point, I'm not I think a lot of times when people look at Ben Roethlisberger, they mix the past and the present together, and it becomes this
all the past.
It's this elixir. Only thing I'd like to say about Ben Roethlisberger at this point is, did you see Ben Roethlisberger trying to run 2 yards to get a first
down? Yes, I did, and I was laughing so hard I didn't see the end of the play. It was strategically, it didn't matter. The reason they called it is because nobody in the stadium, with the exception of Canada and Ben, thought he was going to do that. And Canada might not have even known he was going to do that. You could see why he did it. They're in good field goal range. You want the first down. I think Ben was trying to catch them off guard because, once again, nobody on earth thought he was going to run the ball. At the same time, I don't think 2 weeks ago anybody thought Chris Boswell was going to pass either. And well, I guess he kind of didn't. So you put all that together. Ben is not Ben in 2014. He's not Ben from 2007. I don't think it takes a genius to figure that out. But what Ben gets by on right now is it's his guile. It's his intelligence. He knows the game. He understands what he's trying to do. And he's eliminated risk. He does not take risky throws. The problem is, he misses on throws. Lance, we were texting during the game. He threw 3 interception balls early in the game against Chicago, and I think he passed maybe 10 times in the first half. He's gotten away with a few things here and there, not risks, but just biffs on his part. He didn't make the throw the way that he needed to make it, and he's going to get caught eventually. And that worry, he's not going to go the rest of the season without throwing an interception. I don't think if Ben throws 1 pick a game in each of their last 4 games, that they're on a 4-game winning streak. That's a really, really thin margin of error. If your quarterback cannot turn the ball over at all, if you're going to win, you're going to have a rough year. And I think that's where they're going. You heard me say it. I don't know how many times leading into the season. This is a team that's going to have a 4-game winning streak, and it's going to have 2 3-game losing streaks. Most of that is going to come from the fact that they don't have an advantage at the quarterback position anymore. Ben is not good enough to win games on his arm alone. He's got to get a lot of things going for it. That's a lot for a coordinator to have to map out. They have to be close to perfect to make up for their talent differential. They can get away with that against Detroit, but it might be this game and then the last one in a while that they're going to be favored in. I'll say that.
Let me give you one last number before we jump into the predictions. And let me read before I do that. Thank you, Steelers Wire, for hopping on. I love this factoid here that Mike Tomlin is 30-32 against the spread when favored by 7 points or more. However, 23-16 at home in that situation. So I guess that basically says take the points and they'll win. So, don't, or I should say, don't give the points and they should win. Another nice little stat here from Steelers Wire. Believe it or not, Ben has a higher average depth of target than Goff, 29.1 versus 26.6.
Could you explain that one to us, Steelers Wire? What's the depth? It's not
Yeah.
yards.
Yeah, he'll put it up there and I'll post it up there. But what it does say still is they're still fairly similar. So
Yeah.
they're still fairly similar, which paints that picture pretty well. And the last stat I want to give before we jump into the predictions here, and I had it up. And if you look at the AFC North, you have points for, points against. Of course, points for is how many points you've scored, and points against is how many that you've given up. The Ravens have scored 221, the Browns 224, and the Bengals 236. The Steelers have only scored 161. Now, they have given up the least amount of points, 169, to the Ravens 195, the Browns 196, and the Bengals 203. But here's the big difference. The Steelers are a -8. They've given up 8 more points than they've scored. So that's the differential number or the difference. The Ravens are a +26, the Browns are a +28, and the Bengals are a +23. That's not sustainable. Let me give you the record of the other teams that have a minus differential. The Jets are 2-7. They're 2-6. Their differential number is -107. The Dolphins is -87. Their record is 2-7. The Jags are -77. Their record is 2-6. The Texans are 1-8. Their differential is -130.
Jeez.
The irony to all of this is the Chargers are actually in first place in their division with a -2-point differential. What it says is that is a dangerous world to live in, because I could go through the rest of the list, but every other team that has a negative point differential has a losing record in the National Football League. There's only 2 with winning records, and that's the Chargers and the Steelers. You don't want to live in that world. That is a very inconsistent world to live in. But let's jump into prediction time. Neal, what's your prediction for this ball game?
I think the Steelers win. I think it's going to be close. It's something like 23-20, probably somewhere in there. Maybe the defense can get on its head, 23-17. I don't have faith in the Steelers' ability to score points very often. It was said in here in the comments that anytime Ben throws a pick six, they lose. I don't think teams that throw pick sixes have a strong winning record in and of themselves. I don't think that's a Ben problem. I don't think it's a Steelers problem. One of these teams could do that, and that could swing the game. And to me, it's really hard to predict these games because of that. They're 2 not good quarterbacks against 2 teams, one of which can make some plays on defense, but hasn't in their secondary, which is Pittsburgh, and a Detroit team that has held teams down under 20 points and has given up 40 points a couple times. To your point about point differential, it's the thing with the Ravens. Well, how about this? Every team in the division has scored 40 points to this point this season. The Steelers haven't even scored 30. They're not a dominant offensive team in any stretch of the imagination. It's not just going to come together. I think getting 29 against Chicago is probably their high water mark. and that was set up, a variety of different ways early for them. And a good field goal kicker certainly helps that. I think Chris Boswell to this point makes a pretty strong case for team MVP. What we're looking at really though is, I think part of the reason why if the Steelers and their against the spread record is circumstantial, in my opinion. I don't know how much that really matters. It's not really a trend, but if they're better at home in those situations than they are on the road, I think largely because it's not incredibly often that you get to be a 7+ point road underdog or road favorite. It doesn't come up all that often. And most of the time, a team is not going to mess around if that's the case. They're going to lean on somebody, let them screw up, and get out of the stadium with a win. That's Tomlin has managed teams to do that, good, bad, indifferent. He's not looking to go look at the games that he's lost. For example, I know one that gets brought up all the time for whatever reason. The Jets game back in I think 2014. It was coming off of Ben's hot streak, and they fell apart. Antonio Brown, they went for it on fourth down, didn't get it early in the game. Antonio Brown fumbled, which he rarely ever did, gave the Jets the ball. The Jets had 2 long drives and it scored touchdowns on them and played defense the rest of the way. So to win close games, to narrow possessions, to limit big play opportunities nullifies a point spread. And I think teams who are big favorites like that prepare themselves to play that kind of a game more than they do to get into a track meet on somebody else's stadium and risk turnovers, risk game flipping plays. Pittsburgh tries to limit those in a season like this more than anything else. So to me, I think it's going to be more like that. A lower scoring game, not all that exciting of a game, and whatever team can make plays on defense is the one that's going to win.
When I look at this game, I think they're essentially the same team. I mean, they basically have the same quarterback. Um, they pretty much have the same offense. I think the difference is on the defensive side of football and the Steelers' ability to get pressure. One matchup I do want to watch is Penei Sewell versus TJ Watt. That should be an interesting matchup. Penei Sewell's a very good player. I thought he's played very well this year. So that's going to be an interesting matchup. I think the difference will be the Steelers' ability to get pressure and their ability to stop the run. They've played the run pretty well the last several weeks, and I love their ability to get pressure. So I think the Steelers will win the game, and because the game is on the road. But I think it will be a tough game. I think it'll be a game that comes down to turnovers and sacks, and I think the Steelers' defense is not appreciably better, but I think it is better. I like the Steelers to win this game, let's say 23-16. I think it'll be a fairly close game. I think it may look a little bit like the Chicago game where the Steelers jump out to a little bit of a lead and kind of hang on towards the end of the game. So I'm going
like
with 23-16. Give me your score.
Like the Denver game.
Give me your score again, Neal. I said 23-16.
I said 23-17. But I agree with everything that you said. It's in line with that. That might even be too much. I mean, it really kind of comes down to, again, if either of these teams can make plays on defense. TJ Watt is on a play-to-play basis about the hottest player in the NFL, racking up sacks like they're going out of style. He's doing it almost kind of quietly the last 2 weeks, which is how loud of a player he is. He had 2 sacks in 2 possessions of the fourth quarter and overtime against Seattle to win the game. Against Cleveland, what do you have? Sack and a half, I think, and then 3 this past week. So you're looking at a guy that is making plays, that can make plays. He might not even be the best defensive player on the team. So to me,
He's not.
If TJ Watt and Cam Hayward can do what they've done all season long, they should be able to get a takeaway or two, despite a secondary and what used to be an all-pro free safety that made plays left and right. This might be a good game for Minkah Fitzpatrick to step up and make a play. You hope he doesn't push. You hope he doesn't make an aggressive mistake that might cost them the back end, that can give up the big play that beats you oftentimes when you're a heavy home favorite the way the Steelers are. But I think if they stay true to who they are and play the game with a sense of discipline and not panic and not try to win everything on one play, they should be able to pull it out. But I think it's going to be closer than people think it will.
And Steeler fans, let me just give you some gambling information or some gambling tips. This is a team that scores 20 points per game. Do not give 7 points.
Yeah, exactly.
Save that money for Christmas.
You have absolutely no reason to think that this defense is going to hold anybody at 12 points or less. You have no reason to think that right now.
Save that money for Christmas. Let me jump into some of the predictions from some of the guys on the live chat. And big up to Felicia. Give me your prediction as well. Mel 21-17. I could see that. That's within the realm. Too bad offensive teams not scoring a ton of points. I like this one from Wes 23-20. Steelers win on a 53-yard winning field goal from the Wizard of Boz. Love that nickname. To the veteran, Steelers freak 16-10 with a bottle of Maalox Chaser. I can see that. Absolutely.
My
Uh,
supply
and
is
some
out.
and some
I need to
Tums.
go buy more.
Tom. And Double H, maybe 23-14. I can see Hawkinson schooling the little bush.
Hawkinson's a beast.
He,
Okay,
yeah,
that kid can play.
yeah,
He's
he can
really
play.
good.
Hawkinson can play. And big up to Jamie Commit. Um, thank you, Jamie. I'm glad to be back. Neal and I are glad to be back. And thank you, Wes, as well. Before we get out of here, let me give you two last numbers to support what Neal was talking about on defense and what we're talking about for this game. Is I think the big difference is the Steelers' defense is better at getting after the pass. So Detroit only has 14 sacks. They're not getting a lot of pressure, and that may be what the doctor ordered for Ben Roethlisberger in this offense. But again, with this offensive line and more starting at tackle, you never know. And I like this prediction from Felicia. If it's 14-9, oh my goodness, there's going to be a lot of Maylocks. It's going to be a lot of Maylocks chaser with the chalky lips and the chalky mouth.
It's gonna be a crazy post game show too.
Yeah, it's going to be crazy. And it's crazy that we have to watch an 0-8 team, but we love you guys. And that's why we do it. It's a labor of love. But we have two last segments before we get out of here. I got a new one. It's called Neal's Nitpick. Is there anything you want to nitpick, Neal, before we get out of here?
You know, I'm not in a real nitpicking mood today.
We got we got to catch you. We got to catch you. We got to catch you late at night, huh? To get the nitpick.
It helps. It helps. I am cranky late in the night. I'm a guy that likes to get to bed, likes to get sleep consistently, and weekends are not good for me during the season. That's for sure.
So
no,
so let's,
it's you know if I had a nitpick right now, I'm frustrated by what used to be a staple for me when it came to predictions. The Steelers back-to-back home games. You always saw them come out guns ablazing in the second of two consecutive home games, and even more so for the rare times they get three. I don't have faith in them anymore doing that. In fact, I think I said it on this show back earlier this season when they had two in a row. And I think they were worse in the second game than they were in the first. Yeah, the Vegas to Cincinnati stretch and then Denver to Seattle, you those two situations in which the second game against Cincinnati was just downright awful. That might be their worst game this season. But the way they played against Seattle right away, and then the way they played in the second half of that game, which has become kind of their calling card now, it's frustrating that they aren't able to put things together the way that they used to. And some of this is kind of advancing age type of stuff. But Lance, there was a time this team boat raced everybody they played at home. They crushed people if they were comfortable. When they had a quarterback in his prime, it's sad. You know, I thoroughly enjoyed the Ben Roethlisberger era. I've seen every snap the guy has taken. I like to think that I know him backwards and forwards. This is it for Ben. I don't. There's no way in the world he's playing next year. I don't care what happens. He's just not going to. And who knows if we'll even see that again? You know, who knows? We legitimately are likely to have a younger quarterback who's probably on the same level of effectiveness that Ben is now, and that might go for the next 2 years. Who knows? It's a team that is winning probably a little bit ahead of what you'd hope for their draft spot, but at the same time, it's not a great. Well, we say it now. I'm sure there'll be 3 of them that go in the top 5 the way there are every year, but they don't look like great quarterback prospects coming in the draft. So one of them might fall to that 16, 17, 18 range, which is where I think the Steelers are going to end up. You hope that works out, but odds are really good Mason Rudolph is their quarterback next year. And I can't help but think, Lance, we're going to be talking a lot nostalgically about the Ben Roethlisberger days in Pittsburgh next season. We don't have Ben anymore. You know, it's gone. He's on the field, but he's not the same guy anymore. And not really a nitpick, I guess, just sort of going off the mood.
Yeah, I think like Steelers Freak said it. Talking about Mason Rudolph for a year is football purgatory. That might be a show. That might be a year of football where we just talk about issues and we just don't talk about the games. We just make it, more a thematic program. Because man, talking about Mason Rudolph, every single game would be awful. But let me jump into the last segment of the program before we get out of here. Yeah, I said it. Yeah, I said it. And a lot of people aren't going to like this statement, but it's absolutely true. Mike Tomlin's a hell of a coach, and Mike Tomlin is a coach that's going to be in the Hall of Fame. I want to congratulate Mike Tomlin for reaching the 150 win mark. He is 20th. Some coaches ahead of him are Steve Owens, Joe Gibbs, Bud Grant, Mike Holmgren, Shanahan, Parcells, Chuck Noll, obviously Marty Schottenhammer, Paul Brown, Curly Lambeau, of course Don Shula, Tom Landry, and congratulations to Coach Tomlin. 15 years, 150 wins. I think he's the fastest to ever get to 150 wins in 15 years. He's a hell of a coach. He is one of the best hires and the best decisions that the Steelers have ever made. And I think he's, at the end of the day, I think he's going to be a Hall of Fame coach. And it's unfortunate that a lot of Steeler Nation still doesn't appreciate just how good of a coach he is. You've been in press boxes. I'm sure you've heard, um, I think you've mentioned it. You've heard press guys say, Mike Tomlin's a hell of a coach. And you've been like, well, in Pittsburgh, it's mixed. It goes back and forth. People don't want him, fans don't want him, whatever, blah, blah, blah. It's mixed. But
It's just
everybody else
fans' way of
outside of,
bitching and venting, though. You do look at the bigger picture, frankly, and you're going to hear this a lot this offseason. I am absolutely floored by the fact that Mike Tomlin got a 4-game winning streak and probably 5. I think they have better than average chance of winning this game. A 5-game winning streak with this roster, a 5-game winning streak with the 2019 roster, a 5-game winning streak with most of the years that he coached. I'm not sure if you realize that or not. Most of them have a 4-game winning streak, but a good chunk of them went to 5 as well. He's done a tremendous job in the early stages of rebuilding this team, navigating them through sexy tanking and putting them in a position to be better next season, to have a future. If you don't think that that's skill, if you think that this offense is Najee Harris, this phenomenal player, I don't know what you're watching. I don't know what you're paying attention to. Mike Tomlin is the guy that has this team playing well above the sum of its parts. And that's not an easy thing to do. And he's been doing it for 15 years. So if you want to bitch and complain about clock management, fine. You don't know what it takes to lead a team. You don't know what it takes to lead anything. That's what Mike Tomlin does on a year-to-year basis. And he's proved that. I'm sorry he didn't win every Super Bowl. That kind of irritates me too. I really would have liked to see the Steelers win the Super Bowl every year. Nobody does that. Okay. Belichick doesn't even do that, but Belichick is so far above and beyond the standard of anything in the NFL. Comparing anything to him is ridiculous. Okay. When he slaughters Shula, Noel, any coach from the past of this historic game, the guy he's just not a fair comparable to anybody. So if Mike Tomlin's greatest flaw is not being able to beat Bill Belichick, and still having a slightly above 500 record against John Harbaugh, probably the second best coach of this, or third best coach of this era, I don't know what you want, but you want Urban Meyer to come in here. He's doing a fantastic job. David Culley, the guy in Houston, that coach is available every year. He gets hired every year. There are a lot of coaches that don't have anywhere close to the ability that Mike Tomlin does to lead a group of men on the field, to become a unit, to become better than who they are. And the lack of respect that he gets, I understand, just from the sense that every team that is less than 14-2 has a coaching problem, if you listen to the fans. Okay. I get that. But the consistency that he has, and perhaps it's frustrating that Tomlin's better at making a bad team decent than he is making a decent team excellent. Maybe that can be argued, maybe. But I would argue fantasy football grossly overrated how good this team was over the last 15 years. Grossly overrated it. And Tomlin got plenty of success, plenty of run out of it, despite several kind of Johnny-come-lately one-off teams that came in and did really well. What's Doug Peterson doing nowadays? I remember there's a certain guy I argued with on Twitter all the time telling me how much better of a coach Doug Peterson was than Mike Tomlin. Okay, let's wait 5 years. Let's see what happens. Sean Payton is also a great coach. I don't think Mike McCarthy is a great coach, but somehow or other he surrounds himself with winners and he's able to win. Mike Tomlin is without question one of the top of this era in the game. And what we see now as the standard of a Hall of Fame resume, Tomlin has it. So, complain as much as you want. The reality is this team isn't very good, shouldn't be 5-3, definitely shouldn't be 6-3, and they're probably going to be.
I think when it comes down to, and we're going to close the show, is that, people have their expectations, which is fair. You can have them. But what people don't always do is sometimes your expectations aren't correct. And people think that their expectations are, and they aren't. Sometimes your expectations are wrong. Sometimes teams aren't as good as you think they are, and sometimes they're
Exactly.
better than you thought they were. It's just your expectation. Sometimes your expectation is not on. But uh and we're going to end it with Felicia's comment. Neal may not feel like nitpicking, but his rant mode is on point. And I think the
To you,
best
Felicia.
comment to end the show is stay safe, Steelers family. Yes, stay safe. For some of you who are getting into the commute, or some of you who are in your jobs already, just stay safe. Happy Veterans Day to everybody out there. And we're going to go ahead and conclude the show. And as always, tune in, tell a friend, and subscribe. Happy Veterans Day once again, and go Steelers.